Hello, welcome everyone to our fourth webinar in the series, What to Expect from Your ERP System. I'm Ruthie Sloan, and I'm the Marketing Specialist for Revolution Group, and I'll be your host for our discussion today on change management. I have a few housekeeping items. We will be recording this session to post on our website, so if you would like to share today's information or revisit it in any way, you can do that. At the end, we will have a Q&A session. Please feel free to submit questions through your presentation on your screen, and we'll do our best to get to all of those, or as many of those as possible. I'm pleased to welcome Karen Patterson of Revolution Group, Keith Malcolm with Jefferson Industries, and Certified Project Management Professional Rebecca Ansley as they discuss leading people through change. For those of you who do not know us, Revolution Group is a Central Ohio-based technology solutions provider founded in 1995. Our partnerships with Plex, Salesforce, Adaptive Planning, and Microsoft allow us the expertise and resources necessary to facilitate our customers' growth. We have been extremely successful in helping our customers leverage technology to revolutionize their supply chains and improve their business. On our staff, we are privileged to have ERP implementation specialists, developers, and analysts with years of manufacturing and supply chain experience. Karen Patterson was our first ERP consultant and now works with clients to optimize their ERP so they receive the maximum benefits from their systems. She is a seasoned professional with years of ERP experience both here in the U.S. and in Europe. Keith Malcolm serves as the Senior IT Manager with Jefferson Industries in West Jefferson, Ohio. Keith managed JIC's Plex Manufacturing Cloud implementation and played a key role in successfully leading their plant through the change to cloud-based ERP. Rebecca Ansley is a Certified Project Management Professional and serves the Central Ohio PMI chapter as trainer for many of their PMP classes. She is a proven project leader with extensive experience in leading IT initiatives. It is now my pleasure to hand the webinar over to Rebecca Ansley.
Thank you, Ruthie. Hello. In this presentation, I am representing the Project Management Institute Central Ohio chapter. My role in the presentation is to lay the groundwork for success factors for large projects. I'm going to be coming at this from a project management best practices perspective. My role is to represent PMI, not Revolution Group, and provide some independent thoughts for you to consider as you are making your business decisions. PMI is the world's leading not-for-profit professional membership association for the project, program, and portfolio management profession. PMI was founded in 1969, and there are more than 2.9 million professionals working in nearly every country in the world. I have been an active member of the PMI Central Ohio chapter since 2002. I teach PMP and PMI ACP exam prep classes. I have also developed and delivered presentations in project management as well as Microsoft project classes. I've been managing projects and teams for over 25 years. My sweet spot has been large, high-complexity projects. PMI's flagship product is the PMBOK, a guide to the project management body of knowledge. There are 47 processes, and they are organized by process groups and knowledge areas. The process groups across the top are initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. The knowledge areas, of which you see a few along the left-hand side, are project integration management, project scope management, project time management, cost management, quality management, human resources management, communications, risk, procurement, and project stakeholder management. In the PMBOK, each of these 47 processes is defined in great detail. Let's take a look at one of these processes, Process 4.4, which is Monitor and Control Project Work. As you can see, it is in the process group. Can you go back one, Ruthie? Thanks. As you can see, it is in the process group, Monitoring and Controlling, and in the knowledge area, Project Integration Management. Oh, we have a different one. Okay, this is showing the monitor and control process at a high level from how the process groups interact with one another. If you look at an individual process itself, it has a picture very similar to this. Sorry? Yeah, we just got the wrong picture in here. So each individual process is going to have inputs coming into it. And those inputs, generally speaking, come from a different process. Outputs out of the processes go to other, outputs out of a particular process will go to other processes. Within the PMBOK itself, the inputs, tools, and techniques used in that process and outputs are defined and discussed. There is a great deal of interaction between the various processes. Outputs from one process become inputs to one or many other processes. So when you look at this, my first reaction would be, wow, 47 processes, that's a lot of processes. Come on, you really need to do all that? Is any of this scalable? So on the screen, I've listed some of the factors to consider when you decide how much needs to be done and to what level of detail. How much effort do you need to put into this? Unless extremely small, I would recommend spending at least a few minutes considering each of the processes. As the project risk increases, the project success increases with more attention to more detail for all processes.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Becky, for sharing with us the best practice methods of the PMI. Revolution Group has been managing ERP implementations of varying sizes for about 20 years. Our methods that we have developed that are called our RevEdge implementation methodology, they are based on the solid foundations of the PMBOK, and we have used that as our foundation to develop a process to meet the challenging project requirements of an ERP implementation. Our methodology includes 5 stages of preparation, design, validation, readiness, and deploy. Using this framework, we're able to have an easy checklist to get through a project, a number of steps that need to be followed so that the foundation of the project can be set, and we can also spend energy dealing on the human elements of leading people through change. So the first step is preparation, which involves a discovery meeting with the ERP implementation team so that we can understand the requirements, of course planning sessions, configuration of the ERP instance, doing some hands-on training of the champions and the admins, and then finally ending with a kickoff meeting with an end-to-end walkthrough of the applications so that all of the primary team members can get a feel for the application from beginning to end. In the design phase, this is one of the longer phases of the project. We are doing training for the key users, the subject matter experts, We are understanding what our hardware requirements are going to be based on our findings of the training and the gap analysis. We're understanding what our data migration process is going to need to look like, doing lots and lots of conference room piloting that actually also gets carried out to the plant floor, determining what the gaps are, determining what kind of resolution we're going to have to those gaps, whether they are resolutions that are business process oriented or software oriented, and then also documenting processes. In the validation phase of the project, we're doing some handoff to the organization here so that we can understand from the beginning of the process to the end of the process, first of all, whether we have met all of the requirements of the organization from a software standpoint, and also making sure that the organization understands the tool set that they have in their hands. So we're validating the software, we're also validating the organization to make sure that they're ready. Additional gap resolution always comes out of these two processes, and additional information about data migration, mapping, and testing. We then go through a readiness phase. This is really very close to go live, where we're taking all of our knowledge, all of our process documentation that has been developed by the SMEs and the key users, and pressing that training down to the end users. We like to wait till the end of the project to get end users finally involved. So doing end user training, making sure that we're ready from a hardware business process standpoint, doing the detailed planning. What is the go-live weekend or week going to look like? Who's going to be where? What's going to happen when? Making sure that we're ready to pull the trigger, and then finally doing the full data migration, which leads us to the go-live. And so with the deploy phase of the implementation, we're exercising all of the go-live first. We, of course, have a pretty decent-sized support staff on hand, including all of the SMEs from the organization and additional consulting resources on hand to make sure that all of the go-live firsts are successful. And then finally, we transition to post-go-live support and implementation to hand off to our support team internally. So those are the framework of the steps that we go through, but there are also a lot of practical things that we are going to talk about today that make for a successful project. It's easy to do all of these things on paper. It's much more difficult to do them when we have people involved. So remember a few things. Make sure that you're planning realistically for your timeline and your resource requirements. It is a lot better to plan for maybe a more extended project and be able to shorten that timeline than it is to set expectations that things are going to happen very, very quickly without the proper amount of planning in place. So be realistic about your plan, really think it through. Keep your risks in mind. ERP implementations can be very, very risky projects. It is certainly much, much more than a data migration exercise. It involves almost everybody in the organization. There are a lot of potential pitfalls, remembering that we have to keep the trucks rolling down the road while we're swapping out all of the systems in the organization. So with that in mind, because this is an extended project, it can last, an ERP implementation can last a year, 9 months to a year or more. So a lot of things are going to change during the project. You're going to need to make sure that as the project lead, you're paying attention to internal and external signs that are happening around you, take them into account, and then adjust your plan. Being proactive in the project is always better than being reactive. It is much easier to solve an issue when you are still in a conference room piloting or a validation exercise than it is to say, let's pull the trigger and try to react. Picking up the pieces and being able to support the organization after go live is much, much more difficult than solving the problem when it is at hand and has come to light. So, and the last practical tactic here is to communicate and communicate and communicate in multiple ways to the organization about the change that is coming down the pike, what it's going to mean from them, and making sure that we're taking their concerns to heart, and that we're answering their questions and presenting a positive project to success. So with that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Keith Malcolm with Jefferson Industries. Keith and I co-led the implementation at Jefferson Industries Corporation, and he's going to help us see some of the very practical things that we did there to be successful.
Go ahead. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Keith Malcolm. I am the Senior Manager of IT for Jefferson Industries. Allow me to give you a quick introduction to my company. JIC was established in 1988 with headquarters in Japan. We are an automotive structural steel stamping and welding facility with Honda as our primary customer. For the most part, if you can see our product on a finished vehicle, something must be wrong with it. We are a just-in-time environment with less than 12 hours of finished product between our weld-off process to our customer's weld-on process. This location alone employs over 650 associates, and we ship approximately 130 trucks a day. We have 22 manufacturing plants worldwide with 8 locations in North America, JIC being the largest. 6 of those North American plants are in various stages of an ERP implementation at this time and are using the same solution as we've selected. JIC struggled for approximately 15 years attempting to implement an outdated ERP system that had 5 major solutions integrated together. As you can imagine, any software updates and changes required extensive planning, testing, and coordination in implementing. There were many other issues that we encountered that were either too expensive or too costly. Due to licensing changes, we were facing a major upgrade expense within the next couple of years, which wasn't going to provide much of an improvement than what we currently had. That's when we made the decision to review other alternatives. In order to be successful, we knew we had to have management backing, but more importantly, we needed 100% top management buy-in and support. We also made the decision to include key system users, which proved to be a huge intangible benefit. Knowing the time frame we had, we gave ourselves 1 year to evaluate and determine our best option, and then another year to implement. Regardless of our choice, it needed to be a phased approach, as we could not afford to rip and replace and risk a negative impact to our customer. We had some old school mentality where the focus was strictly on production, and any systems we use were considered just a necessary evil. However, our organization and business grew, so did the complexity of the processes and the days of supporting a manufacturing facility our size by a cumbersome ERP system, spreadsheets, and pure brute force was coming to an end. We also knew that internal resources were already limited, so we had to make sure that we use these resources efficiently and effectively. In order to get the support of our associates, both American and Japanese, we took the approach that the evaluations and scores of the potential ERP solutions by our key users would have a greater weight than that of management, given that each area met the requirement that management set. In addition to the typical goals such as inventory accuracy, management also set some soft goals that will determine project success, such as, are we confident in the information being presented? Is it coming from a single source? Are we proactive rather than reactive? And our production hot lists and expedite lists are becoming an exception rather than the norm. We also need to move toward world-class operations. And most importantly, we wanted people to enjoy coming to work. Whatever solution was selected, it needed to be one that was not only going to meet and exceed our needs and requirements, but it needed to be driven towards capitalizing on current and emerging technologies. Also, the solution needed to be able to be implemented within the 1-year time frame we set for ourselves. A year seems like a long time, but it truly isn't, especially when you're faced with 15 years of deep-rooted practices. We also knew there would be disagreements along the way, but agreed that whatever the final decision, it is to be fully supported by all. That meant that some of us may have to swallow our pride and put a smiley face and move on. Sorry, I need to go back one. As mentioned before, top management buy-in and support had to be 100%. Once the decision was made to move forward, our president was fully committed to the success of this project. Just prior to this project, our president began an internal campaign to focus on obtaining world-class manufacturer status. He compared this with the beginning of the U.S. space program and using the slogan, "Shoot for the moon." He viewed this project as a major step in obtaining that goal. To ensure that we were committed to reaching that goal, we established a steering committee that would meet regularly to discuss the project. Any major items that were a potential risk in delaying the project was assigned to an executive level person to ensure that they were adequately met on time and within reason. Since this project encompassed most of the company, we wanted to give it a name that seemed appropriate and understood by both American and Japanese. So what were we going to call it? It definitely wasn't an information technology project. We didn't want to stick with the generic ERP project name. And a process improvement project seemed a little bit cumbersome. We used the word smart. This is a word that had meaning for both the Japanese and Americans. Then we decided to use the letters as a meaningful acronym to help drive that point. The last two words meant the most for us. For our business to continue to grow and compete as a world-class operation, real time was something our legacy system fell short of. Since our decision was to replace our current ERP system, our plan focused on only implementing those modules that would replace our current system and to include only additional components that were required as part of that module or process being implemented. With only having a year to replace a legacy system, we needed to be sure that we stayed focused and do our best to avoid the dreaded project scope creep. In addition to the traditional project management methods, we use various other tools to keep track of this project. The top picture of this slide shows one of those visual tools. It's a high-level timeline of our project. On that board are Post-it notes that have tasks and milestones written on them. They were then placed by the expected completion date on that timeline. As those were completed, instead of throwing away the note, we moved them to the bottom of the board. This was a great visual for people to quickly see the progress being made by the growing number of tasks that were being completed. People wanted to get their tasks done so they could move their Post-it note. Any items or concerns that would arise that were not part of the original scope of work and it did not have any effect on current scope tasks were written down and placed in the parking lot for later view. As you can see, a few of those notes are on the far lower corner of that same board. As mentioned before, our president's internal campaign was Shoot for the Moon. With that in mind, he converted an area into what is now called the Moon Room. We use this room as the brain center of the project. The room was open to anyone that wanted to stop by, and we made it convenient since it was right next door to the cafeteria. We used this room extensively throughout the project for meetings, training, and demonstrations. At the beginning of the project, we knew that stress was going to be a given. So during our training sessions, we provided every participant with a stress brain. And you can see the picture there on the board. Once he started to get out, people would stop and ask where they could get one. Of course, if they wanted one, they needed to attend the training. But obviously, it was not necessary for everyone to attend. So towards the end of each training phase, I would make sure that other people in those areas would receive one as well. Another major milestone in our implementation was the handling of WIP. Our material service department did their best to keep the inventory located. However, without a means of tracking and locating material within the plant, we relied on tribal knowledge. With the new system, we were forced to handle material more efficiently using serialized inventory. This meant that our material service people needed trained to use scanners and the process to go along with that. So to drive that point, we came up with the slogan, "Move it, scan it." We then had buttons made with that slogan and handed them out to all our associates to wear. It's important to keep people informed and engaged, especially if a project is taking a year. Our company was already providing regular associate meetings throughout the year, so we took advantage of those times to provide updates to the project and keep people engaged. Several other ideas were tossed around, including a weekly newsletter. However, some things just couldn't be done due to the lack of resources. But what we did was make sure that we took time to stop and ask the associates how they were doing with the new process and then listen to their response. They're the ones that will determine the success. Understand that if they are struggling with a particular process, chances are they have already thought through the problem and have a solution. Let them explain the problem and then ask how they would fix it if they haven't already told you. Most important of all is to give them credit for it. Recognition for a job well done goes a long way. Training is obviously a key component to how well this project will turn out. We set up terminals in the Moon Room to simulate actual situations. Our focus was to train our associates just prior to rollout of each area. This helped with memory retention and reduced frustrations. During these sessions, we also found one or two people that would catch on fairly quickly and understand that process. We would take advantage of that and ask if they would be willing to assist with the training on the floor and help address any questions others may have. I don't recall one person that refused. In fact, they were enthusiastic about it. People have different motivational triggers. Some like recognition, while others are competitive. And who doesn't like a little extra cash in their pocket? These incentives don't have to be big or expensive. The purpose is to keep the momentum going. And always, always celebrate your wins, even if it's just an aha moment. You'd be surprised what a handshake, a pat on the back, and a big thank you will do. With all that's going on, people need to also stay focused on the goal. As change happens, be sure that people understand that the process is theirs. They own it. They have a responsibility to make sure the job gets done correctly. This is especially true in managing the project. Every task, milestone, and issue is given a champion, and it is their job to get it done. That doesn't mean they have to do it alone. It just means they are responsible for the success of that task using whatever resources necessary and available. When considering a major change, such as an ERP implementation, there are a few things that are sometimes overlooked. For our approach, we chose the phased-in method. Using this technique, we had to support our legacy system as we moved forward. This involved creating bridges, interfaces from the new system to the old to continue to operate normally. In addition, we understood that the workload would also increase during these transitions, so we included potential costs for items such as overtime, temporaries, and equipment. As I mentioned before, be aware of this project scope creep. These are things that sneak their way into the project that weren't part of the original plan, and they always cost money and usually delay the project. People in general will resist change, especially when it's forced on them. We took the approach to offset that resistance by getting people involved from the beginning and giving them a voice in the process. We listened to their concerns and needs and genuinely addressed them through the process. We made sure that they understood that when they had questions during the process, that they had a contact person readily available to work with them through that issue. By doing this, we greatly reduced the anxiety and stress levels and found people looking forward to the positive impact of these changes. This concludes my portion of the presentation, and I will now hand over the controls back to our host.
Thank you all very much for that information. Very useful, very practical tips. We're going to have Q&A. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to submit those. We will wait a few minutes to see if any questions come in. I do have one for Becky. You mentioned that you are part of the Central Ohio chapter. If someone on listening to the webinar is out of state, how can they find information about Project Management Institute?
Sure. The International Project Management Organization's website is www.pmi.org. In most states, there are multiple chapters. In Ohio, there's 5 chapters. In other states, most of them have multiple chapters. Usually one is relatively close to wherever someone may be. And in fact, there are chapters worldwide. So to find out more about PMI, the PMBOK, and Project Management Institute, you can go to www.pmi.org, and you can find links to where the different chapters are, how to join. You can get your own very own copy of the PMBOK and take a look at it. And if you are sleepless one night, you can try and read it. But it has, once you have studied it for a while, it has a lot of great information in it.
Question for Keith. Did you have any really stubborn issues? Anyone that you really had a difficulty converting, and how did you manage that?
Yeah. As with any organization, you always have somebody that will resist change regardless of what is presented to them. We did our best to encourage that person to adapt to the change. There wasn't much that we could do in certain instances that would alleviate that, but we did try to address those concerns, and sometimes they would have other suggestions on how to make the change, but we would always come back to our original plan as we agreed upon to make sure that those processes were implemented. At this time, I'm not sure of anybody, even those that resisted change the most, are still resistant. I think they've adapted to it and have embraced it. We've had one instance where we were given a tour, and it was actually on a second shift, and our group was fairly large. And as we crowded around one of the fork trucks to demonstrate their use of the technology, we had another fork truck driver drive up without being prompted and led half of the group over to his fork truck to show them the same process so everybody wasn't crowded around. That's the kind of excitement that we generally found.
Excellent. Excellent. Karen, you mentioned that you were part of this process with Keith. How involved was Revolution Group in their implementation?
We were very involved. We co-led the project, really from an external resource to bring the knowledge of the application to the organization and to help with the implementation of the system on top of the business process. So our role in making sure that we helped folks that were resistant through the process in large part was to make sure that the things that they were resisting against weren't real problems that needed to be solved. And that if they were having fear, that we were in a position to make sure that what they were fearful of was not going to come to fruition and help just to get them over the hump.
That looks like that's all of our questions. If you have any questions afterwards, you're welcome to give us a call or visit our website. We would love to have you be part of the rest of our series, and we are actually extending our webinar series. We're going to add some more topics and titles through the end of the year, so check our website for those when they're posted. Thank you everyone again for presenting, and everyone for attending. Have a wonderful afternoon.